car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Welcome to the Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. So glad to have you with us. And on this edition of the Attorneys, we're going to be talking about child custody considerations, what parents need to know about child custody and legal decision makers. We'll tell you all about that. But before we get into the meat of things, I want to remind you that attorneys from Hollis, Wright, standing by right now to answer your call at 1-844 Law Talk. That's 1-844 Law Talk. It is a free and confidential call. All you have to do is dial, and you will get an attorney from Hollis right now. Craig Shirley is here. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, Art.
Yeah, and we got a big topic tonight, sensitive topic.
We have a great topic. It's one that we do cover frequently with some variations because it is unfortunately something that a lot of folks out there in the community are dealing with, right? It's divorce and child custody considerations. And when we have this topic, we like to bring in, the experts like JR to help us navigate some of those nuances, explain some of those topics and considerations. And, I know that JR is an expert because JR and I went to law school together, graduated together. So JR, thanks so much for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and talk about something that is so important to a lot of people, and issues always come up. And, you mentioned other people come on and talk about this thing, and I think I'll talk more about it later, but I think it's good to have different viewpoints and hear from different people about it, because you'll probably always hear different things or different variations of information you need.
Right, and before we dive too far into it, tell us a little bit about what your practice is. Is it just centered around the child custody and divorce? Is that the majority of your practice? Tell the viewers a little bit about.
So I'm actually an attorney at a nonprofit locally, but prior to that I was in private practice and I only did custody, divorce, family law. That's still a bulk of my practice. Now in my practice I focus more on privacy issues related to those, but mostly divorce, family law, custody. And
you mentioned privacy. I think we may touch on that in a little while, but let's kind of dive into it because like you said, it is something that a lot of folks are dealing with. And in your practice and your experience with these divorce and custody issues, what is something that you are seeing that divorcing parents are often overlooking or not fully considering either before they get into the divorce proceedings or not fully considering or overthinking as the divorce proceeding progresses?
So before I go into the privacy part of that, I think one of the things is specific to each family for custodial schedules. One of the things, a lot of us have general templates that we use, or if you try the case, the judge is going to have a general custodial schedule. One of the things that I see a lot is people not factoring in their specific circumstances. So an example would be like, most custody orders are going to have time sharing for holidays and a child's birthday. And so if you have a child whose birthday is December 26th, and then you have a final order that says each parent should have time with this child on child's birthday, but alternates each year for mom will have Christmas to New Year's and dad will have that in even years. So you're creating problems just because you're not thinking through it. A lot of times us as lawyers, we know these specific things and we may forget to address them. So, it's not the court's problem, I don't think, they can't foresee all that. And so I think that's one of the big things. I think it's important I always tell people once we get a final order, look through your final order, look and see where you may have issues. Is there something we need to address? To amend the final order while the court still has jurisdiction to do it, rather than going back to try to modify it once it becomes an issue.
And that's a great point, because Lord knows some of these things can be very confusing. And you mentioned general orders. Some judges have orders they like to use, and some judges have different orders with different language. So I think it's, like you said, it's very, very important to read through it, make sure what it says, because, we try to catch everything, but sometimes we just can't. So Through your practice, though, is there something that representing folks who are going through these divorce and custody proceedings that may become an issue, that may be need to be better addressed on the front end or considered, or hey, let's make sure that we have this specific kind of language in the final order? Is there something that pops up often that you see?
Yes, one example would be, and this kind of goes back to the privacy, something we see a lot, or I see a lot, unfortunately, is postpartum depression. And so when I see something like that, I know from the beginning that's going to be an issue. That may be what initiated the divorce, or that may be what most problems stem from. And I think, most orders, most agreements will say neither party shall embarrass or harass the other party. But when you have something like that, I always want to address that specifically, because you want to prevent medical information from getting disseminated, especially after the divorce. And, some people will say, well, it says they shall not embarrass or harass each other, but why not address that specifically? I hear a lot from attorneys that say, well, we can't really address that. What are they going to do? They can't unsend it. I think, addressing it at least provides a remedy. You can't unsend the information, but what you can do is provide a remedy through contempt. There's no way the court can say, we're going to make sure you never send this to anybody, but if they send it to somebody, the court can at least punish them for doing it and hopefully deter that from happening again.
All right, so the courts, they have their final orders and they expect the parties to comply with that, but these divorce proceedings the nature of them, they can get contentious, and there's things. Are you getting pushback when you're trying to include certain language and the other party's not wanting to, or are parties able to agree on some of these things?
I think sometimes people can agree on those things. Another privacy issue I see a lot is pictures that were sent between parties with an expectation of privacy. So, you may have one party who says, well, you can't force me to delete these pictures. I'm not going to delete those. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing, just address it head on. And, it does come back to being in the best interest of the child. If you have a parent who gets divorced and then starts posting pictures of the other parent that were meant to be private, you can affect that parent's job, their ability to make money, cause additional problems for your child, mm-hmm. like bullying. So some of those things, I think most lawyers would agree on things like that, but I think they're maybe sometimes try to be careful not to lock their clients in.
And that makes sense. I know we got to go to break. So when we come back, though, Jared, I want to talk about the instances when one or both parties do not comply with the order, what the considerations are, their options are, and what those consequences may be. I think that'd be good for the viewers to look at.
Yeah, we're just getting started here, and we know you guys are just joining us, but we've got a lot to unpack on this. I want to remind you, though, that Hollis Wright is on all social media platforms. Go ahead and share, follow us, and be friends with us there. You get a lot of good, useful information, a lot of great resources, whether it's on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, also on YouTube as well. You can find out a lot about Hollis Wright, so go ahead and join us there. We're going to continue this conversation on the other side of the break, so stay with us. We'll be back with the attorneys right after this.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
At Bradford.
And welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. So glad to have you with us. And we tell you there's so many ways you can get in contact with Hollis, Wright? You can scan that QR code on the screen. You can get in contact with us there. And we told you the number, 1-844-LAW-TALK, for a free and confidential call with an attorney from Hollis Wright. They're standing by throughout this show to take your call right now. And Craig, as we were going to break, we were saying we were just getting started, but contempt was something that came up, and we want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, and so Gerald, we were talking about, we have the orders that come down from the court, whether it's, early on in the proceeding or you have to go through the trial. The judge is going to issue an order that requires the parties to behave a certain way, have custody at certain times. But like we mentioned, that can get contentious, right? What happens if one of the spouses, one of the parties to that order, don't comply with it? They keep the kids over the weekend when they shouldn't, or they continue to violate that order. What are their options and some of the consequences that come from that?
I think first, the important thing to know is there's two different types of contempt. So you have civil contempt and you have criminal contempt. Contempt, to prove contempt, you have to show that the actions were willful and that the party doing whatever you're saying they shouldn't do had the ability to comply with the order. So civil contempt, one of the generic examples is, a parent is supposed to pay child support, they have the ability to pay, they have the sources to pay, they just don't. And then criminal contempt is something that they just refuse to do. So an order says, you shouldn't share pictures of your child on social media. They share the pictures. So the purpose of criminal contempt is to deter any further behavior like that. Purpose of civil contempt is to get them into compliance and make them comply when they have the ability to do so. So with each, if there's a violation of the court order, the other party can file a petition for rule nisi to show cause. And then they have the burden to prove that the other party had the ability to comply, if it's civil contempt, or to show that they just disregarded the order. And then the judge can issue fines, sanctions, they can issue jail time. And one of the things with civil contempt, you can purge yourself. So if a parent owes $2,000 in child support and has the ability to pay it, then they can just catch that up.
And now you mentioned kind of working on the front end to address some of those issues, both as the clients and the attorneys. Is that what you're talking about as far as trying to get some finality and some clarification through those orders ahead of time, so to avoid some of these contempt proceedings in here?
Yes, because going back to what we talked about earlier about we use the sending pictures with the expectation of privacy, for example. If that's not addressed and the order just says neither party shall act to humiliate or embarrass the other party, then you have a whole other issue when you go back to court. They didn't know that would embarrass or humiliate the party. The order's not clear. And so addressing those on the front end, you can prevent that, and so hopefully prevent that from happening, but also if it does, make it easy for the party that it happened to have a remedy.
Right, and you mentioned preventative measures, and especially this day and age, it seems like every day there's a new app coming out or some new AI features, some sort of technology that's supposed to help our daily lives as we progress through society. But are you seeing any tools or apps or AI features that are helping parents post-divorce co-parent their children and work together to avoid these misinterpretations of the rulings and to avoid any of these contempt issues?
Yes, there's a lot of apps available. The one I'm probably most familiar with and recommend the most is Our Family Wizard. It's not one of the free apps. There is an annual subscription, but I tell people all the time, what you pay for that subscription, you're going to save in fees later down the road. There's so many features in it. One of the ones is you send a message, there's a timestamp, you can see when they read it. You can't go back and change what you said or delete what you said. And that's just helpful just to have the records. As the lawyer, you can go in, download the transcript of it. And especially now, people have the ability to delete things they've sent and just text or unsend a message. And so that to me is super helpful. You also have the ability to upload documents, records. So I think that's a tool that is not utilized nearly enough. And there is fee waivers for that. It's another great thing about Our Family Wizard. So it's available to people that may not have the resources to pay for it as well.
And you and I talked about that fee waiver. What's the fee? How's that waiver process work? I know you mentioned it's an annual subscription, but it sounds like it could save a lot of headache and heartache if the parties can use that, because it kind of saves everything, keeps everybody honest, so to speak.
Yeah, the fee waiver, so I believe they have different levels for the subscription. I think right now, I guess I wouldn't say basic, but the lowest subscription is, I believe, $149.99 a year per parent. With the fee waivers, they have the forms on their website. It's a super simple process. They're super helpful. I've used it when I've represented a child in a case as the guardian ad litem, and I knew we needed something like that so I could stay involved, because it also allows the lawyers to see the messages, to log in so we can see what's being said or what's being done without having to talk to our clients. And so just filling out the form, it goes based on income, but in my experience, they've been super helpful, and I haven't asked for a fee waiver and it be denied.
Well, that's great, and that's why we bring the experts on our
That's right.
talk about all the good stuff. So when we come back, let's talk about other avenues other than just going through the trial in this divorce, and JR can help us talk through that.
Absolutely. We'll put a pin right there. I also want to remind you, you've got a little bit more time left as we head into the final segment of this episode. You can still reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. It's simple. Dial 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call with someone at Hollis Wright. They're standing by right now. We'll take a break. We'll be back. We'll wrap things up. Glad to have you with us. The Attorneys continues right after this.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
And welcome back to The Attorneys. Throughout the show, we like to give you useful information, and you see that scrolling at the bottom of your screen. Information like this one. Unless there's a court order sealing a case or marking it confidential, the pleadings and the orders filed in a case are public record. So just keep watching and you'll see information like that. We want to make sure that you are always informed and make the right decisions along the way, which is what we're doing right now, bringing in the experts to talk about this.
And so JR, we get it all the time too in our personal injury practice where, clients will ask us, are we going to court? If we file a lawsuit, what's the jury going to look like? In these divorce proceedings, talk to the jury about how first that court process works. Because we always hear the word trial and everybody automatically thinks there's going to be 12 folks sitting in the jury box. So talk to the viewers a little bit about that.
Well, one thing unique to family law or domestic relations is you don't have a jury. Probably one of the reasons a lot of us that do that work enjoy it. It takes out the aspect of, having a jury is a whole different aspect. It's a whole different part of a case. So, when you initiate an action, a lot of times I think lawyers try to act proactively to prevent having to go to court because a lot of things can just be settled on their own. But you will have, if you have an issue that can't be resolved, you need to file a motion, get it set for hearing. One of the things I enjoy about Jefferson County, once we get set for trial, you can also be asked to set on a settlement docket. Settlement docket is an available resource where lawyers come in and volunteer their time to mediate these cases at no expense. And so, jumping ahead to mediation, but mediation is a good tool for people to use because if you can't get a case settled, if you mediate, at least you can see what issues can we get settled, are there things that we can stipulate to, that way when we go to trial, we're not trying the whole case. We're not, if we agree on custody and a custodial schedule, we can stipulate to that, and then when we go to trial, we can talk about what are the remaining issues. And I think, a good thing about mediation is you also have control over how something's going to happen in your case. I'm sure, I hear all the time lawyers will tell clients, if you don't settle, then, neither one of you are going to be happy. Once the case is done, you get a final order. So mediation is good that way you have input and some say in how the final order is.
Right, because there's a lot of issues, right? Whether you have a ton of assets, whether you have a few, whether you have one child or five, right? There's a lot of issues floating out there. Are you seeing a trend with mediation? And I love the settlement docket idea. I wish we had more of that on our side of things. But are you seeing a trend with the mediation, with these required settlement dockets of the parties being able to work out the issues, whether it be issues they knew about going in or issues that have arisen through the case? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I would say mediation is, even if you don't get the whole case settled, is usually successful. If both parties are mediating in good faith, you can do private mediation, and then most people have buy-in because they're paying the mediator. With the settlement docket, these lawyers that volunteer their time, they have experience in that courthouse. They know, or they're able to almost predict what a judge may say about this specific issue. So a lot of times, if you're up there and the only thing that's remaining is arguing over an item that costs $900, it's easy to say, look, by the time you pay me and by the time your spouse pays their lawyer and you try this case, you could just get it settled with the use of the mediator.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good tool, and we see it on our side too. It helps streamline the issues, helps streamline the case, and I think that helps everybody, right? And the topic we're talking about is divorce and the child custody considerations, and that's something that I think sometimes people will forget about. As like I said, it gets contentious. The spouses, soon to be ex-spouses, are going at it, and there's just a whole lot of considerations. So I love the aspect of the mediation, the settlement docket. With that in mind, I know you were telling us earlier you have extensive experience in the family law arena representing spouses through the divorce proceedings, through the child custody considerations, throughout trial where the judge does come down and issues a final order. This may be a loaded question, but I think it's one that some of our jurors may be asking. What general advice would you give to parents who are either one, considering a divorce, or have decided, this is our only option, this is what we got to do? What advice would you give those folks?
The first thing I would say is talk to your spouse. That probably is a loaded answer to the question.
Fair enough.
If you're getting divorced, it's easy for me to say talk to your spouse. That's not always something that people can do. But if you're able to talk with your spouse and, talk about what you foresee the issues to be, you can probably save a lot of time and money. I don't mind telling clients, I'd rather you spend your money on your child rather than me. And tying into that, one of the things is I tell people to always meet with a few different lawyers before hiring one. Not every divorce lawyer is right for every divorce case. I don't subscribe to the idea that I should just take every case that comes to me. Each case has different issues that are specific to that family. And we have a lot of great practitioners in Jefferson County. A lot of them may have specialized experience, and also just personality. I think we've all heard people say they're getting divorced, they want a bulldog. Well, what is a bulldog? Well, that's different to everybody. And so I think talking to different lawyers, you can get a good sense of, when you talk to one lawyer, you may think, oh, they're going to be great. Then you go talk to another one and you're like, wait, I kind of like what that person said about this issue and how I may address this and like our plan for that. So I would say talk to at least 2 or 3 lawyers. When people reach out to me, whether it be divorce or something else, I try to give more than one name. That way they can find the best fit for them.
Sure, and I think that's fantastic advice, because we get calls all the time of it doesn't end when the final order is issued, right? Like we talked about earlier, is there are things and guidelines and stuff that the parties have to comply with. So the advice of reach out to an attorney or multiple attorneys, I think is fantastic. And JR, we really do appreciate you coming on and sharing with us and talking with the viewers. I hope it was informative to them. I know it was a great discussion on our end. It was just a great time, great topic, and we really do appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me, and hopefully the information I provided can help viewers.
It will. Yep. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. That's why we have the show. That's why we bring on the experts. That's why Attorneys for Hollis Wright makes this show available to you, because we share useful information with you, make sure that you get the resources that you need, provide the experts to help break down the various topics that we have on the show. And we also make information available throughout the week on various social media platforms, on X, which is formerly Twitter, of course, on Instagram, on Facebook, also on YouTube. You can follow us there, share the information there, and let other people know about it. We certainly appreciate you joining us this week, and we invite you to go ahead and make an appointment to join us again next week, same place, same time, for another edition of The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.